Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Donation. I am Matt Bitsaguy, and I am here with Noah Barnett, and we are going to talk today about just technology solutions and what part they play in effectively managing our nonprofit. Noah, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm glad to be back and grateful to kind of talk about this. This is something I've been thinking about for so long. I was in-house doing fundraising and growth, and then the past 10 years in tech, similar to you, Matt, where like this question of like, what role does technology play in kind of a nonprofit success, or how should nonprofits really think about the role of technology always comes up. And we see it even here when we're working with people considering adopting DonorDoc as their, one tool to really have their team get fundraising done. The question becomes is like, what else should I be thinking about? It's not just technology. And so I'm glad we're getting into this today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, I've been in that kind of CRM technology space for 20 plus years. The organizations, both for profit, nonprofit, that I've worked with, I think the ones that are most successful are the ones who look at these things as a tool that supports and complements the strategy of how to run the organization, not as like a silver bullet that's going to just all of a sudden make everything better just through the tool itself. And I think that's the right way to think about it for sure. So, most small, lean teams within these nonprofits, I think they don't necessarily fail because of bad tools. I think a lot of times what we see is that the real problem comes when they're trying to use too many tools to do too many things. And it just adds all sorts of complexity and makes it really, really difficult to do things effectively. So one of the things that we look at DonorDoc is just the idea that, there's a lot of power in actually choosing smarter, smaller platforms that not necessarily smaller, like in terms of their functionality, but just in the footprint, of having maybe one tool that can do the job of multiple things that you're doing today. And I think that really helps to free up time. It helps to unlock efficiency and so forth. And I'm excited to talk about that today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a great analogy here with like when you're building something, right? Like if I have to do one thing and then I have to put this tool down and I have to go find another tool and I'm like, how does this tool work? I'm like, okay, well now I need to like hammer this thing in and then I need to put this tool down and go find the other tool that's going to help me do this. And ultimately what's interesting in that example is we focused and highlighted on tools. And you would think like, oh, we need to solve the tools problem, but there's also like how to use the tools. There's what's the order of the tools we should use in. So there's both this element of like the human example, like the person using the tools. There's also like the process and training and onboarding of like how to actually use tools or what order to do something or how are we actually trying to build. Then there's the tools. And I think that's what I always keep coming back to with organizations is when they're saying, hey, we're looking at technology or we want to consider a new tool, like even DonorDoc. It's like, okay, help me understand what you're trying to accomplish. Who's on your team? What processes do you have to run? And then what tools do you currently use? And then how can we consolidate all of that to, again, support your strategy? And so there's just a lot of non-tech or tool questions that have to go into these considerations.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as you think about your time in the sector and, working with a lot of different nonprofits, working in a nonprofit, what are some of the common things that you see that are kind of going wrong in this, as it relates to kind of technology and tools?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I think the common one that most of you will hear what I'm about to say and resonate is, we're using 3, 4, 5, maybe 11 tools, but none of them talk to each other. And again, the challenge isn't that they don't talk to each other. It's that now we actually have data or tools that don't understand the context of what the other tools are doing as it relates to your supporters. Because ultimately, you as an executive director or a nonprofit leader are trying to steward relationships with your supporters, right? You're one organization and they're one human, right? Like they're one individual or supporter. But when we then use multiple tools to be able to facilitate that relationship, we miss the context. So we actually create disparate experience because we have disparate data, because we have disparate tools. And because we're running these processes, like, for example, we might have our fundraising over here, we have our email communication over here, and then we have our donor development person calling, from here. And we don't actually know what's going on across these tools. So that's probably the most common problem of where I see things go wrong, is that disparate tools mean disparate data, which means disconnected experience for your supporters. So they feel as though they're interacting with multiple organizations. And it reminds me of like experience I actually just had, where I was calling a healthcare company. We will not name names here, but I was calling them and I was trying to get information on my insurance policy and like what was covered and like what doctors I could go to, et cetera. Like a very common thing. Like, I have insurance, I'm calling you. And they're like, oh, what, you got routed to me. I only work on corporate plans. You have an individual plan. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to transfer you back into the wheel of death, which is like what is your problem today, thing. And I'm like, this is my problem. And then I talk to someone and they're like, I actually can't solve that. I can't find you in this tool. And then she goes, oh, wait, let me look in this tool to see if you're over here. And like, I'm on the phone, but I'm imagining her like being like, opening a new tab, being like, And she's like, I can't find you anywhere. I'm going to have to send you back to somewhere else. And I'm like, I have one company that I thought I could trust. And now what I'm experiencing is this disparate thing because they're using multiple tools, multiple teams, multiple processes. And it's really painful. It's really, really painful.
Yeah, I was just chatting with a United Way director here about a week and a half ago. I mean, she was explaining exactly what you're talking about within their organization. We have this system over here where we track donations and things, and then we've got this system that we use for texting, but I don't ever know if anybody's already reached out to these people because I only know what's in that texting system, which is separate from the system that we do our email out of. So I have no visibility into like what touch points, what engagement is actually happening with our donors. And that can create some rough experiences from a donor's perspective, I think, for sure.
Absolutely. And again, I think I want to be cautious in assuming that the solution is a single tool to solve all problems, because I don't think that's actually the solution either. But there is a kind of all-in-one promise that has its flaws. There's also this kind of best in breed, kind of like you should just have the best tool for the job. That comes with challenges. And so you kind of have to, again, think back to like what's best for our organization, because there isn't a single answer. And so what that then requires is you to step away from the technology and really take a deep look at what are we trying to do, and I call that strategy, but it's like, who are our supporters? What programs are we running? Like, who are the people we're trying to connect with? What are the programs we're trying to do? And what are the kind of like pieces of that puzzle that we need to, like the programs that we're running to be able to facilitate that? And like, what does that need to look like? Okay, now let me go back and look at what systems, and that includes your people, your processes, and then your technology or your platforms are going to support that. Mm-hmm. And it might be best in breed. It might be a bundled solution. It might be all in one. But again, it goes back to really questioning, what is our strategy? What are we trying to accomplish? Who do we have to help with that? Now, what tools are going to help us accomplish that in the best way possible for us?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you touch on kind of the all-in-one versus the best in breed, but either way, going back to what we discussed right at the beginning of one of the challenges is disconnected data. No matter which way you go, all-in-one, best in breed, I think it's really important that you're doing what you're doing to try and break down those silos of data. So if you're looking at a best in breed solution, you need to be sure that that's a best in breed solution that is well integrated with these tools, so that we're getting away from, I've got this data over here and I've got this data over here and I've got this data over here, and none of it knows what the other data says. And I have to try and kind of figure that out myself. I think that's, but it goes back to the idea of starting with what are we trying to solve? And that helps inform us on the best way to solve it. Not, I'm going to buy a tool because I think it's going to be some silver bullet that just makes everything work great for me.
Yeah. And we're two technology people sitting here right now, right? And we would love to say tech is going to solve all your problems, but it often doesn't. And I think we've talked to organizations too that have partnered with to do tools, or maybe it's the number one CRM, and it's still not going well. And it's like, why is that the case? Like, what's going on here? How can we help this organization kind of rethink their systems so that we can support their strategy in the best way possible? And I think that just brings up another point here, is that technology can sometimes, especially by board members, maybe not you listening because you guys see the outcomes of your tools every single day, but it's like, it's just a tool to get a job done. And so it's like, what tool is best to accomplish this? And I think what that misses is that there's a difference between having a tool and really having like a platform that can like help facilitate these conversations and like support your system holistically. Like, it's almost kind of a part. It's like, I always talk about this like three-legged stool, and on the top of the stool is your strategy, and you're defining that. And then you have these three legs, one being your people, like obviously your staff, your volunteers, your partners, whatever. Then you have your processes, which are like, hey, what are these people doing to help kind of like run the strategy? And then you have your platforms. I think if you just look at platforms and you pull that tool out and or pull that leg out and just put tools there, you're missing the opportunity that you're putting too much reliance and dependence on your processes and your people to really understand and facilitate how this tool is best utilized to support your system. Whereas when you think about choosing a technology partner or a platform partner, they can come alongside you and help support you in knowing how to even adopt the tool, or how you can say, okay, you're trying to do, soft credit reconciliation of corporate gifts because you want to make sure you know who's doing this, because you want to make sure that Tom, who is one of our biggest donors, is seen as an influencer on this corporate account. Like, that's what you're trying to do. Okay, here's how the tool can best support that. Or we get a bunch of peer-to-peer donors that come in, and it's really hard for us to engage them because, Matt introduced John to the organization, and John doesn't have a direct relationship. And so we never know what to do with them. And so we kind of just let John like give once and then wander away and like see what happens. Right. And it's like, well, wait, what if you actually use your technology to reference that John was introduced to your organization by Matt? Well, that would be really great. And then we can use that information in our follow-up strategy to be like, hey, John, we are so grateful that Matt introduced you to A, B, and C nonprofit. Like, here's what that looks like, because I know that you got to introduce to us at this event, but like, here's all the other data about our organization, and we want to invite you to partner with us. Like, how do you want next steps to work? But again, I'm starting with what the supporter knows, because I'm using my technology to help facilitate that connection. But you might not know that that's possible if you're just like, how does this tool work? Like, can this tool do what I'm doing? And so I think it's really deeply important that no matter who you work with as your platform partner or partners, you see it as a collaborative relationship, because that is going to help you ensure that your people and your processes are actually set up most successfully to support your strategy, because you know your strategy. And so you can come to your platform partner and say, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. How would I be able to do that with your solution? In this case, DonorDoc. Here's how we would do that. Here's what we've seen other organizations do. And here's how you might then apply that to your thing. Oh my gosh, that's great, right? Because you're applying what you want to do to the tools and platforms you have, and then in best support of your system. So then all the legs are kind of like standing up that top equally, right? Like, because what happens is if our tools underperform and we have a short leg there, our stool like goes like this, which then requires our people and our processes to overperform just to hold our strategy up, and it's still wobbly. You really need them working in synergy and you like holistically to be able to support that.
Yeah.
That's why you need a platform partner, not just a tool.
Well, and I think there's like two types of organizations, or maybe it's, two different areas on a spectrum of, like, I have really well-defined processes. We're all trained. We know how to do them. We know that they work well for us, and we need software that can align to the way we do things. And then I think on the other end of the spectrum, you have organizations who are like, we really don't have great process today. And how can the platform help inform us on how to do some of these things? And so now you're aligning your process to the software. So like understanding, I think, where you're at as an organization when it comes to that can also help you find the right platform partner that either has the right level of customization to make it fit the way you do things, or that has really well defined processes you can follow because you don't have them already yourself today. And some platforms probably do really well on both ends of that spectrum. And then there are some, I look at tools, I spent a lot of my career in more of the enterprise software space, the enterprise CRM, so the Salesforce, the Microsoft Dynamics, and those tools really lend themselves well to aligning the tool to fit your process because they're infinitely customizable. They come as a shell out of the box, and you have to kind of make them work for you the way you want. And then I think you have tools that are like more like DonorDoc, where it's like we have these things built to follow best practices. And if you're really struggling to implement these things or do these things, then that can be a really good choice. And so finding where you fit in that and like where you're at as an organization, I think can really help you hone in on the right platform partner to help you where you need the help.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that kind of comparison. And I think too, you mentioned kind of having something that's in the middle. And I feel like you mentioned DonorDoc kind of being that as well. And I see it you have kids, Matt, I have kids, and you've probably seen like the Lego sets where like it's one set of Legos, but then there's like three things you can build.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's even like, oh, you can also go build these things with this Legos, which I've always loved because it's like not just like just put it together this way, right? And if you miss a piece or you lose a piece, like you can't do this, right? It's like, hey, we're giving you this set of Legos. We're suggesting that there's these three things you can go build. But then also through building these three things, you also learn what else could be possible. And maybe it's combining these things or building something else. And now your boat becomes a dragon, right? Or something along those lines.
Yep.
Because that might be what's best fit. Yeah.
It's a really good analogy because I think when I'm first starting with Legos, the set where I follow the instructions and I end up with a result that I'm happy with, that's kind of like I don't have a lot of process today, and I'm trying to kind of get into that. The sets that allow you to build multiple things and you can kind of choose and evolve and change those things as you get better at it. And on the other end is just I have a ton of Legos and I can just build whatever I want. Right. And I think there's very few people who are good enough with Legos to just take a bunch of Legos and build anything meaningful. There's probably more people that fit either in the middle of that or at the end. And I actually think it's why you hear so often, like we hear it all the time, of people who fall in the trap of we're a small organization. We're going to take advantage of Salesforce's 10 free licenses and we're trying to make it work. And ultimately, they're not at a level as an organization from a process maturity standpoint and a technical capability standpoint to be able to take that big Salesforce thing and make it something meaningful that works well for them without hiring a consultant or spending a
Lego expert.
Figures.
You gotta,
Exactly.
You got to go hire one of those Lego masters to come build it for you.
Yeah. Exactly. And so like for that type of audience, I think having either the set that lets you build three things from one set of Legos or even the set that just guides you through to getting to a really cool outcome of the Death Star that I've built in the Lego set, cool. Like that, I think that is a really good way of thinking of that. And for organizations, again, this isn't just unique to nonprofits. I saw this so much in the for-profit space as well when I was working in that space for a long time. It's like being honest about where you're at and like what platform is really going to serve the purpose for you. You're going to end up with a better outcome if you take that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening into this episode of Beyond the Donation. This conversation is so incredibly robust that we wanted to take a pause and come back with the rest of Matt and I's conversation about how you can think about systems design and how that informs on how you should think about picking the right platform partner. You're not going to want to miss the rest of this conversation, so tune in next time.